Today, though, we're talking about the fact that Israel are no longer slaves. So in this section, we've got, that's not the right one. Oh, that's not even the right one. Huh. There you go. The flash drive's in my backpack, I think. It's not even loaded. Here I am, tired, and I forgot what I'm doing. On your page, while I get that loaded up, I'll get that figured out. There's a question at the top that says, how do you know if you're ready to undertake a new challenge? Sherry, you've come across a lot of new challenges in your life. How do you know if you're ready to undertake one? I mean, you got married. How did you know if you were ready? You didn't know or you weren't ready? Both. That makes sense. I mean, it's one of those kinds of things. Adam, you've gotten a new job before. How did you know if you're ready for a new job? You didn't. You didn't know if you're going to be able to handle it. Liam's about to get married. Liam, what made you decide I'm ready to get married? Are you ready to get married? You believe so. Are you ready to fulfill the duties of marriage to the best of your ability? You think you're ready. Do you know, though? You're confident. You feel that you got that confidence. I would hope you wouldn't start that process if you weren't really ready for it. It's one of those kinds of things. We don't know if we're ready. Kids, right? Marriage, death even. When your loved one dies, are you ready for that? Do you know how to go on without the person who you love so much being in your life? I mean, how many of you have lost a parent? How many of you lost, anybody lost a brother or a sister? Yeah. I mean, how do you go on without them? You do. Obviously, you're here. You're making it. But you don't always know if you can. And so this gets a little bit tricky in the fact that you don't always know if you can. Alicia, are you having trouble? Did you find the flash drive? You didn't find my flash drive. No, I'm looking. You saved it? Okay. If you got it, you got it. I'm not worried. All right. So the idea, though, is that if you don't know if you're ready for something, there's got to be a way to figure that out. And so the bigger question I'd ask you is, with all these other little things, how do you get to that idea eventually? And I would propose this. If you didn't have a good answer to write down at the top, if you're committed to doing it God's way and with God's help, you're ready to do anything. So Liam, you're going to get married. If you'll do it God's way with God's help, you'll be successful. I know it. That's just what it is. If you wanted to start a new business, if you'll do it God's way with God's help, you'll be successful. But if you do it your way, on your own skill and talent, well, it depends on whether you're talented enough, I guess. That's one of those kinds of things. So it's hard to know if you're going to be tough enough to handle some of that kind of stuff. Alicia? I'll just help. It's no big deal. These people are very forgiving. They're used to me. What's this one here? Sorry about that, folks. That is totally my bad. I'm usually more on top of it than that. All right. On the back of your sheet today, I want you to turn yours over. I've got a new feature for you. I really want you to be able to see the Holy Land, the land of Egypt, and the places they may have gone. I've got a couple places I want you to label for me on the back of your sheet. Now, you guys probably know where Egypt is my guess. On a map, most people can point out Egypt. It's very famous. Go ahead and write down Egypt where you think Egypt belongs. If you're guessing that place next to the river delta, just below the Mediterranean, with Alexandria and Cairo in it, you've got Egypt nailed down. Israel's labeled for you. That one's easy. You don't have to worry about that one. Does anyone know what nation is on the other side of Israel, just below Jordan. It's Edom. Edom. Right? That's where Lot ended up, right? Edom is just below where it says that Jord. Just below that in the mountains is Edom. Do you folks remember where Midian was? It's not on their west, it's actually on their east. So if you're looking at your piece there, just above where it says Sharm El Sheikh, just above where it says Sharm El Sheikh, that's the land of Midian. So at the bottom, in the red, where the Red Sea is, it comes up kind of like a peace sign. At the bottom, next to this finger here, the middle finger piece that would be like this, if you do a peace sign like this, right here is Midian, right above the Red Sea. Right where it says Sharm El Sheikh. That's where Midian is. And then that big wedge in the middle is the Sinai Peninsula. The Sinai Peninsula. I'll show you some map images in just a second, and you'll be able to look at that then. Alicia, do you? I can help. Do you want my help? Are you sure? It's okay. I should have had it. It's my own fault. Hey, look at that. So is it in here then? How far out? All the way out? Technology. I don't actually know how to do that. Clear all? Yeah, I don't know how to do that. I don't like technology a whole lot. That's why I don't have a phone, guys. That's why I don't have a phone. I don't know how to do it. Sorry. You guys are so patient. I love it. You'll have to forgive me if I freight train through some of this lesson, though, to get all the content in. Thank you. What a great gift. Your understanding is much appreciated. All right. I'm going to skip the review. If you guys weren't here last week, you can, of course, find all that goodies online, whether YouTube or on our website. This is the map that they give you in the Bible typically. This is like one of those old school maps they would put in the Bible. And you can see here Arabia, Egypt, and so forth. And you can see that they think, according to this map, that they left from Goshen, they crossed the Red Sea in the Gulf of Suez. So if you look up on there, the one on the left finger like this, if you're doing a peace sign like this, the one over on this side, over here, that's the Gulf of Suez. And they think that's where they crossed, or the tip of that. In the old maps. I don't think that's where they crossed. I don't think that matches up with the archaeology. I don't think it matches up with the history. I don't think it matches up with the Bible. And so the one that's on the far side down there below, that's the Gulf of Suez of the Red Sea. And the one on the other side is the Gulf of Aqaba. 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 And I think that might be more likely where they crossed. Now, there are two places they could have crossed the Gulf of Aqaba. I'll try and talk about both. But they say this is what happened, and it just doesn't seem to line up with what the Bible says. But I mentioned before, if they can disprove the Exodus, which Jesus spoke of, which Stephen spoke of, with Isaiah speaking heavily of it, everything that Moses is wrapped up in talks about this. If they can discount Exodus, you can throw your Bible away. If Exodus didn't happen the way God said it happened, then your Bible is worthless. Because a lot of this is predicated on this idea. The tabernacle comes from this event. The movement through the mountains and the way that they worshipped and who they worshipped. The I am comes from this event. Moses is delivered this information. If this is not true, then Jesus is of no effect. He's not a precursor of any of these things. God does not reveal himself in these if this is not true. And so we want to make sure we have the best information we can get, I'll say. In Exodus 13 and 17, it came to pass when Pharaoh let the people go, God led them by the way of the land did not lead them by the way of the Philistines. On your map, next to the coast here, all up and down the coast here, that's the way of the Philistines. It's a very smooth and easy road. It was constantly used for trade, and this is where you would have Egyptian soldiers posted at every outpost. They protected this area because they were in charge of this area at the time. They did not want people getting through without taxes, without tribute, without security. It was a very popular road, and God said, I'm not bringing them that way for two reasons. God said, lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war. God did not want them, when they came to the promised land and encountered war for the first time, to get afraid and to take the easy way back to Egypt. Now in Exodus, if you have one in your own life, it's very similar. If you come out of a world of sin and you come out into the easy way and try and get into everything God has for you the easy way, it's very easy to go back. And so it's often very difficult for people when they leave the world behind, because God's got to show them some things, just like he did with Israel. Because the last thing God wants for you to do is to go back to your sinful life. So God let the people around, a different way, around the wilderness of the Red Sea, the Yam Suf, which is sometimes interpreted the Sea of Reeds, or the Sea of Beginnings, or end of the sea, basically. And the children of Israel went out in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt. They marched like a military, in orderly ranks. They were prepared to march, and they marched as if they were used to being in small, organized groups, like slaves would be. Your work crew, right? Very similar to a military. God had prepared them for this. Now, on this map, it shows two different paths. It shows that sea route, the easy one, the Philistine way, which goes straight up to Philistia in purple. And the other road, which is more likely, is the King's Highway. And it reached out into the east towards the Kings, and it went down toward the Gulf of Aqaba and then turned straight up and went on the other side of the Dead Sea. And it's very likely that this would have been the path they would have taken. And the reason I say that is the only other place they could have gone is to go straight down the peninsula along the coast, because otherwise it's too mountainous in the middle, as you can see. There's a lot of mountains in this area of the world. They took Joseph's bones with because they promised they would do so. And if you find the evidence for his tomb, and they think they have, there were no bones there, even though there was a statue there of a man in a multicolored coat who looked Hebrew, not Egyptian, in a very small pyramid, meaning he was very important but not a pharaoh himself. And there were no bones there, which is very weird for a mausoleum. Usually in a tomb, there's bones there, but the bones were removed. And they left Succoth, which is an unknown location, and they camped in Etham, which is also considered an unknown location. Though I tend to think, on our map here, Succoth is right near the tip of the King's Highway above the Gulf of Aqaba. This is what I think, and we'll see why I think this in a second. So they left those places. God leads them by day by the pillar of cloud, and at night with a pillar of fire. So God gives them a cloud, something visible to see and follow after, and in a desert, it's pretty obvious. There aren't a lot of clouds there. So a big pillar of cloud would be very noticeable in a desert area. And at night, they get heat and light from the pillar of fire. So God leads them out, but they have nothing. They feel warmth, they feel light, they have direction. That's all they get. God's direction, warmth, and light. That's enough for most people, it seems like. And they had to camp at Pi Hiroth between Migdal, a fortress, and the sea. So they had to pass a fortress on the way, which is probably why Pharaoh knew where they were going, keeping tabs on them a little bit by horseback and messengers. And in Numbers 33, they departed from Ramses in the first month, on the 15th day of the 15th month, or the first month, and on the day after the Passover, the children of Israel went out with boldness. So on your sheet it says they went out with boldness. They're not cowering, they're marching like an army, like we said. In the sight of all Egyptians, they didn't care, they just marched out. They saw them take the stuff, they saw them walk out with the plunder. Some of it was given to them purposely, like, here, just take this, get out of our sight, we can't handle you being here anymore. For the Egyptians were burying all their firstborn. If you were a firstborn male in Egypt, you died. That's what it was. That's what the 10th plague was. That's what it was about, and so they died. And so they were busy burying all these firstborns. Also, their gods, the Lord had executed judgment. Like we said, all of them, he had made them, so nobody has any faith in Egypt right now. So they're shaken to their core, and they let everybody go. In Exodus 3:11 through 12, it says, "Who am I that I should go?" I'm reminding you, this is what Moses had said. "Who am I that I should go?" And God said, "There will be a sign to you." This is the sign. "When you have brought this people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain." When he said this to Moses, this is near the burning bush, he had revealed himself to the burning bush. He was in Midian, not Sinai. This is the mountain you're going to come back and worship me at, and it's in Midian. So on your map on the back, I had you write down Midian because I want you to know that it was not in the Sinai Peninsula where some people put it. That doesn't mean they didn't cross over the Red Sea into the Sinai Peninsula. It just means that they weren't in the Sinai Peninsula when they went to see this mountain. And so here's a more detailed map. You'll have to look at this, and if you want to, online, or download it yourself if you want to see this. But you can see kind of Midian down in the corner there, and you see a couple different possible routes they think they took. It's really hard to see the yellow, little green one, but the green one that goes across the middle seems like the most likely destination. Of course, in this map, it says they went around the Gulf of Aqaba over to this mountain in Midian. And again, that's cutting my God short. It's really not hard to denounce a God who performs no miracles. If there's no miracle involved, it's really easy to say, well, he's not God then. The Egyptian gods couldn't perform the miracles. They're not gods then. And there's some evidences here that say that God would have had them go someplace promising. Now, when you go to Midian, there's some interesting things there that line up with the Bible. Elim is one of the first stops in Midian that they talk about. I'm kind of going ahead in the story to get backwards. I'll be there in a second. But the Elim oasis is in Midian. At least it looks like it. The Bible declares it as 12 wells and 70 palm trees. And it's the only green spot in this barren chunk of land. It's just across the Red Sea, across the Gulf of Aqaba. And the Bible talks about this place of 12 wells with 70 palm trees, and it's there today. It still has 12 wells. Then it says they camp by the sea, and here you can see the Magna Oasis, another place of watering in a dry and barren land that's near the Gulf of Aqaba, the Red Sea. It's very likely they stopped here because they had a lot of livestock they had to feed and water. And the town of Midian itself, currently called Al-Bada, is the historical Midian. The country itself acknowledges this is Midian. This is where it was. This is where the people that lived there. And you can kind of see it in the distance. There it is. Just up the hill from this town of Midian, where they think Jethro would have lived, there's a well that to this day they still call the Well of Moses. None of this is in Sinai. But there are people right now who would tell you if the Exodus is real, well, it was real, but it was Ramses who was the Pharaoh, and that it happened in the Sinai Peninsula. But none of these places is in Sinai. They're all in Midian, which means they must have crossed water into Midian to find these places, according to what the Bible says. If you're walking in Midian, you'll find this big rock on top of a hill. What's really interesting about this rock is that it looks like somebody split it in half. Now, if you've read the story before, you know that Moses whacked this rock with a stick, and water came out, because this is on the west side of the mountain range in Midian, and there was no water in this area. There's no oasis here. It's very hot and very dry. And they needed water, and God provided it through Moses with this rock. And you're thinking, well, so there's a rock on top of a hill. So what? There's lots of rocks in Minnesota. Minnesota's full of rocks. This is a big rock, guys. That's a person at the bottom. That's a huge rock. A lot of water could come out of there. A lot of water could come out of there. And there's even erosion marks. Well, of course, people say, well, it's 3,500 years ago. Of course there's erosion. There's lots of water that could have poured over that. In the desert? Well, it's wind. Well, maybe. Maybe there's some wind erosion. I'll give you that. But there's a lot of erosion, especially at the base of that rock. It looks like water had poured over it. Oh, it must be a flooding or something, right? On top of a hill with a big rock. Very interesting kind of thing. And what's even more interesting, in Midian, you find this, what looks kind of like a rock concert stage. Pile of rocks out there, right? You guys can't see this in detail, so I'll zoom in for you, but can you see what's on the side of some of those rocks there? What does that look like? Some sort of pictures, sort of paintings? They're cows. Was there ever an altar in Midian where cows were worshipped? Where they danced before cows and Moses smote them because of it? And he burned up their cow? Where we talked about in Egypt how when you get burned, it's the worst possible thing because there's no body to go to the afterlife. And Moses literally comes down and he burns a metal cow. Never made sense to me before. But he burns a metal cow because if you burn something in Egyptian culture, it is absolutely destroyed and disgraced. And then he crushes it and makes them eat it. Right? Like, that's a crazy story. But it makes sense if they were worshiping near this mountain. And if you go near this mountain, out on the east side of the mountain, there's this huge flat area. Could you fit maybe 2 million people hanging out there? Of course you could. And not only that, but there's an altar at the base of this mountain of uncut stones, like the Bible declares. And it's laid out like an animal pen for slaughter, with the altar at the one end, the southern end there. Right next to this, you see some broken down pillar stones too. Remember those 12 pillars that Moses was supposed to have built at the base of the mountain of God? I'm not saying these have to be them, but it's very strange that they're there. And here's Mount Horeb itself, with a little bush in front, like you would have seen for the burning bush. And the top of the mountain is not under shade. It is actually black, as if a giant pillar of smoke sat upon it and discolored all the rocks. And I saw a video of a guy go up there, and he turned the rocks over, and on the other side, they're not black. They're a different color, as if they were covered in soot or something that was kind of baked on. Maybe it's a natural feature. It's possible. I don't know. It's very interesting to me. The most interesting thing is this. The little red box in the back is where the peak is. I just showed you the peak on the other slide. That's where the peak would be. And right in front of it is a flat area that's up the mountain a bit, where the Bible would have talked about Aaron and the elders getting together and talking with Moses at the foot of, not the foot of the mountain, but on the mountain itself. Not at the peak of the mountain, but on the mountain. They told Moses, you can go up and talk to God. We're going to stay here. But they did want to talk, and they could see all of Israel. And then just below that to the east is that altar I showed you. And just below that to the east is that flat plain where the people would have sat. That's an awful lot like a natural tabernacle plan. It faces perfectly east, just like the tabernacle always had to. That is a strange coincidence that there's a natural feature that God would have used in this way, unless you believe, of course, the Bible is true. So on your map, this is about the closest I can come to that I found online for what probably happened. Now, I don't need you to draw this yet. I'll let you draw in just a minute, but I just want you to be aware, it doesn't sound like they did much in Sinai at all. It sounds like they traveled across Sinai very, very quickly. In fact, they would have had to travel very quickly, according to some accounts, because that journey was supposed to happen within 7 days and nights. And that's a pretty brisk pace, even with God at your side helping you out. It's still a little under 2 miles an hour, or 2 miles, a little under 2 miles an hour. That doesn't sound like much, but you add it up, it's several hundred miles. It's a pretty tight fit. Of course, they're slaves, so they're in good shape. But they have to carry all their stuff and animals and things with too. So it's still a pretty good clip, according to what some people would say. Now we get to the good part. Trapped. You see, Pharaoh says, I need to do some things. I need to get these guys. In Exodus 14, speak to the children of Israel that they turn and camp at these places we talked about, camp before the sea. So that to camp is one of the requirements. They must be camped before the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they are bewildered in the land. They've made a wrong turn someplace. They don't know what they're doing. If they're going back to the Levant, to Israel, which doesn't exist yet, but if they're going back to Canaan, they must go up the other direction. And they're moving full east. And then they turn and go back west and south. Like they turn and go the other direction. And Pharaoh is just as confused as I would be. He's like, why are they doing that? They don't know what they're doing? Are they lost? Well, if you had little servants, sheep, little lost sheep, and they were being lost, you would go take advantage and bring them back, wouldn't you? I think Pharaoh would, right? We know what kind of guy Pharaoh is, this proudful guy. And God said in here that He's going to do some things. I was told of the king of Egypt that the people had fled. The heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people. They're like, we can get these guys back. They don't know what they're doing. They've taken off, but we don't have to let them go. Why have we done this? Why have we let Israel go from serving us? I don't know about you, but if I had 2 million servants in my country, 2 million of them, slaves, servants, you would not see them just let go. We have examples of this in our own country. In the South, they did not just let slaves go. Even in the North, they kind of transitioned them into slave-like jobs without calling them slaves. They don't want to just let people go. It's too easy to get the work out of them. And so they travel south, and they enter this ravine. I think they enter this ravine, the Wadi Watir, because there's rocks on either side, and the wilderness is swallowing them up, if you will. And they travel down this dry riverbed between these mountains. It's not always dry, but it's often dry. And they travel down this here, and Pharaoh gets a chance to catch up to them because they're twisting and turning between these mountains. They're kind of getting hemmed in by the wilderness, which is what the Bible says. And Pharaoh draws near, and the children of Israel were very afraid. And wouldn't you be? 600 chariots and trained military men who've won 3 different contests under this Pharaoh and bragged about it. The cruelty of this guy who hung people from walls and from upside down from his ship, right? This is not a guy to be messed with. And he sends his best men, his charioteers, captains, against Israel. Of course they're afraid. So they're watching the foothills. They're worried that they might be followed, and now they are followed. But now they're stuck in the wilderness. If it was just a chance to escape and run into the hills or flee, but they don't have a place to go because they've traveled this place that it's very difficult to get out of. And as it opens up on the sea there, they can probably see Pharaoh's army approach them. Now, this place that they go to is very interesting. Do not be afraid, God says, in typical God fashion. If you've read the story in Matthew of the miraculous birth of Jesus, or in Luke, we know that it's always do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Every time the angel shows, do not be afraid. And so God tell them, do not be afraid. Stand still. Don't do anything. Don't run, don't fight, don't flee, nothing. Stand still and watch what I'm going to do. See the salvation of the Lord. God does not take anyone out of anything he is not prepared to keep them out of. If I was preaching, I would shout that again for you. God will not take anyone out of anything he is not prepared to keep them out of it. John Remington does not smoke cigarettes anymore. Why? Because he's got a great God who keeps him out of those things. It's very simple to understand. Doesn't mean John can't choose to go the other way, but it's the idea. So the salvation of the Lord is coming, which he will accomplish for you today, for the Egyptians whom you see today. You shall see no more forever. You will never again see them. They're done. They're not going to go home with you. They're not going to go home, period. They're gone. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. And here's the beach at Nuweiba. Now, Nuweiba Beach is interesting. It's like a big chunk of sand, a huge chunk of sand. And on your map, if you look, the little white dot halfway down the Gulf of Aqaba is where you find that. It's a little white dot. I think they went down this general direction, and they hung out there and camped on the sand by the seashore. And the reason I say that is if they go across above Aqaba, there's no water to part, or there's no water currently, at least that we know of, and it's not much of a miracle. If they go all the way down to the bottom, where there's a different strait and some islands, it's all coral reefs. And it's almost impossible, it would be impossible for the elderly, for the infirm, for children, for animals to get through very easily at all. So they need a relatively smooth, open, and easy path. And so this beach here is an interesting place to see it. Now, I want you to picture this. On one side of the beach, Israel is encamped. And on the other side, and blocking that hole to try and escape, is Egypt's army. And he says, lift up your rod over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel should go across on dry ground to the midst of the sea. God makes a promise, says, I'm going to get you out of here. There's nowhere to go. They can't go back to Egyptians' army. They can't plunge themselves into the sea and hope for the best. Any trails that lead away from this beach are too small for 2 million people to escape effectively. They're going to be hunted down and shot with archers. It's just not going to work. And indeed, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians. If you start to cross, I'll harden their hearts, and they shall follow you. I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over his army. That's a weird thing to say, but not for God. See, God doesn't do anything half-heartedly. He doesn't do anything halfway. He does everything to the best of his ability, which is perfect, and he is going to be honored in the things he does. And Pharaoh and his pride and his horsemen, his chariots, and the people, all these things he's trusted in for so long. This Pharaoh is known for battle, and this is his number one trust. I always have my soldiers. Even if the gods of Egypt fail me, even if I fail as Pharaoh, I still have my soldiers. God has one more lesson for Pharaoh. And he says, the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. So you can see the mountains in the distance. This is the water that they're facing. There's nowhere else for them to go. And so the pillar, came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to the Egyptian side. And it gave light by night to the other. So they saw Pharaoh's army coming up at the dusk time of the day. The day is getting darker, and they come up on them right at nighttime. They encamp. Rather than have a battle at night, they encamp. And the pillar of cloud moves between them and darkens out the Egyptians' view so they can't see anything, and brightens up the Israelites' view so they can see everything. And so one did not come near the other all that night. So the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on the dry ground. After Moses lifts up that rod over the water that's been used for everything else, this rod that turned to a snake and ate up all of Egyptian serpents, this rod that turned water to blood, this rod that was used to cast all kinds of miraculous powers into being, the one that hit the rock and let the water pour out later in the story, this rod is held up and the water splits in the midst of the sea, and they walked across on dry ground. And there was a wall on their right hand and on their left. A wall of water. If they crossed in some shallow little lake or little pond or little strip of peace back near Egypt, Pharaoh would have just gone around. Why risk another dangerous miracle of the Israelite magicians? Just go around. But here there's nowhere for them to go, and there's nowhere for Israel to go. And so they walk through on dry ground. The reason I think it's the Nuwebe beach is because you can see there the little white dot on the left-hand side. That's the beachhead, and the mountains on either side of it. And there's a topographical map that shows that it descends down 900 feet, over 8 miles. That's a typical grade that we would find on a handicap ramp. God found a place through the waters that was built so handicapped people could walk it accessibly. And it's mostly sand, which is great if you're on foot or you have livestock. It's pretty terrible if you have wooden chariot wheels. And they walk all night across this sand on dry ground across the other side. And when the Egyptians do decide they're going to follow, God helps them by knocking off the chariot wheels. So they start to panic. As they're going across the Red Sea, dry ground, the wheels are popping off and they're panicking. And they flee. Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. They said, we can't do this. We're falling apart. This isn't working. Let's turn back now while we got a chance. They're already afraid. They already know that God is with them, and they can't compete. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and when the morning appeared, at the first dawn of the sun, directly behind Moses, because he's facing west over the Gulf of Aqaba, and the sun's right behind him. And as the sun comes up over the hill, Moses raises his hand, and in full sight of every Egyptian, and I believe Pharaoh on the other shore watching his army trying to scramble out of position or get to the Israelites, the water walls collapse. and they're all overthrown. When the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the army of Pharaoh, that came into the sea after them. It does not say Pharaoh went into the sea. It does not say all of the army went into the sea. It says all the army that did go into the sea was completely obliterated. I imagine that Pharaoh, with his most important generals, is sitting back watching, salivating at his slaves returning, until as it starts to get lighter and lighter, and the walls start crashing down. And at this point, like the loss of his firstborn son, he's in utter panic, utter ruin. And here it says, the people feared the Lord. Egyptian or Israelite, they all feared the Lord and his servant Moses. In Isaiah 51, Isaiah, the prophet of Jesus, with hundreds of prophecies related to the Messiah, says this, "Are you not the one who dried up the sea?" Referring to God. "Are you not the one, the Lord, who did this? The waters of the great deep." There's another reason I think it's the Gulf of Aqaba. The Gulf of Aqaba is thousands of feet in most places. It's nearly 2,000 feet deep. In the spot where it goes down, it's only 900 feet deep, and it's fairly gentle slope. But 900 feet is a great deep, in my opinion. The Suez Canal is at most 200 feet deep. That's still pretty deep, don't get me wrong. Still deep. But it's not a great deep. It's not worth bragging about, in my opinion. I don't want to cut God short. I'm not saying they couldn't. If they wanted to cross there, if that's where they actually crossed, more power to them. God can have them cross wherever he wants. But I tend to think it's in an impossible situation, so only God could get the glory, because he said, "I will receive honor." "And the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with singing." Do you know what they did as soon as they got across? Do you know what Moses composed? It's a song. And if you did your homework and you looked at the website and saw those verses, you already read it. "They shall obtain joy and gladness. Sorrow and sighing shall flee away." All the threat of their past coming back to haunt them and get them is floating face down in the water. They passed through the waters. If ever there was a Bible verse to try and convince somebody to get baptized, this is the one. Because God is going to take care of all your other problems as long as you'll go with him. What's really interesting, and they can't prove that Solomon put this there, but there's a red granite pillar that weighs 11.7 tons. And it was found tipped over, kind of washed in the beach a little bit, and it's been there for thousands of years and has not eroded away. It's a little worn, but they propped it up and they cemented it into the ground. And the guy who found it, Ron Wyatt, some people think he's a crackpot. And you know what? Maybe he is. I don't know. But he said on the other side of this crossing, where this narrow strip of sand would be, where they could cross, it's not that narrow, but narrower strip of sand, he said he found another one on the other side. Now, if there was one there, it's gone now, no one can prove it. But the fact that there's a giant red granite pillar that's propped up here, why would you put that on some random beach where there's nothing there? There was no one living here. It was an uninhabited beach. Why would somebody put up an 11-ton red granite pillar there? And it has matching pillars in Israel, on the coast, near where the Philistines would be, on the Mediterranean. Very interesting stuff there. This is the route, I think, and if you want to draw it, if I've convinced you, you can draw it yourself. This is the route I think they took. I think they left Goshen. They crossed over near some of those shallow lakes in Egypt. They traveled down the King's Highway, almost all the way, if not all the way to Aqaba, at which point they turned around because God told them to. And they camped down at the beach in Nuwebe. They crossed over this strait up into Midian, because that's what the Bible kind of declares. That's what I think happened. If you want to debate with me about it, I would love to do so. If you have different ideas or evidences, I've read a lot of them. I've been on this kick for about a year now. Exodus 15:8. In the Song of Moses, it says, "With the blast of your nostrils, the waters were gathered together." Maybe he's being poetic. Maybe God really did just go and blast the water apart. I have no idea. But it's possible. The flood stood upright like a heap. It does say the angel of the Lord was there. Maybe the angels held back the water. Maybe there was a strong wind blowing the whole time that held back the water. I have no idea exactly what was going on. Maybe there was a wind tunnel of some kind. You blew with your breath, and the sea covered them, the Egyptians, and they sank like lead in the mighty waters. Again, mighty waters, deep, great deeps, not shallow lakes, not some silly pond. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders? And the correct answer, of course, is nobody. Nobody's like God. All right, I got to rush through this part pretty quick. Pharaoh's end. Manetho names Amenhotep. Manetho does this. So if you're looking at your sheet, it's Manetho is the historian who names this. The names, an Amenhotep is only used in the 18th century. Only in the 18th century is this used. Amenhotep the first is too early, and Amenhotep the third is too late, according to both Egyptian and Israeli records for this time period. The Pharaoh who tried to kill Moses had to reign for 40 plus years, and Thutmose III is the only one in the 18th dynasty who did at 54 years. The only Pharaoh to do so. If you're going to check the biblical account and match it up with real records of Egypt, he's the only one who reigns long enough for Moses to have to be in Midian for 40 years. All the firstborn sons die in this 10th plague. Amenhotep II would have died himself if he had been a firstborn son. And as the Pharaoh, he should have been the firstborn son. But his brother Amenemhat is the one who died before Thutmose did. And Amenhotep's son, Thutmose IV, should be his firstborn son to reign as Pharaoh. That's the way pharaohs worked. But he wasn't. He was the second son because his older brother Weben-Senu died mysteriously and suddenly as a youth. And this here, if it'll work, there it is. There's a lump of rock in between the Sphinx's paws, which is not naturally there. It's called the dream stele. And they actually use this as a propaganda piece to convince the people of Egypt, because the Sphinx is such a cultural icon and so important to them. They tried to convince everyone that Thutmose IV should be Pharaoh. Very strange that they have to have this propaganda during this time. And so the dream stele states how the gods told him that he would be the next Pharaoh. Amenhotep's palace was located in Avaris, the Hyksos capital. He actually grew up near there, and it was abandoned during or right after his reign. The last identifiable pottery pieces of the Semite variety, the kinds that the Egyptians did not use, the kind that the Hyksos or the Canaanites would have used, disappear right after Amenhotep II. And if 2 million plus people plundered and then left Egypt, I think there are some portions of Egypt that would cease functioning properly, which includes this city. Very interesting kind of stuff. He was born and raised in Memphis, which is in the north, which is unusual for a pharaoh. He should have been raised further south in Thebes. He was considered the high priest over Lower Egypt, which made sense for the previous story why he was always working with the priests. He was co-regent for Thutmose for 2 years, and then after that, in his 3rd, 6th, and 9th year, he went to war. There's no recording of him doing anything important other than the years listed up there, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, and 23, which means there's a 14-year gap for the most important person in Egypt to do nothing. What did he do for 14 years it was literally so unremarkable that there's nothing recorded then? And he dies at about 47 years old, according to multiple research. If he really was the most important guy in Egypt, he should have some monuments, he should have some records, he should have something of value, and there's nothing. It's blank. History is blank. It's almost as if somebody had knocked him down a peg or two so hard and so often that he had nothing left to brag about. And there's this interesting stele of Useret, one of his friends, so one of his companions in another country he writes to often, and he actually carved it in the rock you saw. And one of the last things Amenhotep does, and when he's recording, is he talks to the people, Useret, he talks to him and says, hey, watch out for foreigners. Watch out for their magicians. Don't listen to their words, and don't pay attention to their messages. Why on earth would a Pharaoh, at the end of his reign, care so much about some random group of people from some other place? It just seems strange. God's plan in action. God creates the first under-ocean roadway. Way ahead of his time, right? We haven't done that till more recently. He crushes Egypt's army. He provides for millions through the wilderness and the desert, and he brings them to his holy place in Midian. God's plans go beyond our readiness, no matter how ready you are, into a future more wondrous. The plans he has for us are great. If you're looking to find out more information about some of these things, particularly that first one, the tomb of the Exodus Pharaoh, very, very interesting stuff. Again, they don't like to talk about some of these things because it proves the Exodus, not disproves it. But there's lots of good links there. You can find all this good material on the website, and you can also clearly go back to YouTube and watch some of these others if you missed any. If you need handouts, I've got extras. You let me know. I hope you guys have a fabulous day. You've got some time now to break and relax, refresh yourselves, be back here ready to worship at 11. God bless.